We're still waiting for Dan Carter, so we may flip item 2 and number 1.
No, he just walked in.
Oh, Dan here?
Yes, he's standing in the hallway.
Oh, he's in the hall. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. It's August 15th, 2022. And for anybody who's not familiar with our usual procedures, this is a work session. So don't expect decisions from City Council tonight. By our charter, we're not allowed to make final decisions except for give direction to staff. And our procedure is a little more informal than during our regular business session. So if anybody does not have a copy of our agenda tonight and is interested, back on the cart there are copies of our agenda. There's 4 different items on our regular agenda. But before we get into our regular agenda, we'll have public comment on non-agenda items. So if you would like to, in just a minute, and you have anything to comment on that is not on our agenda, we'll just ask that you come and come to the podium, take 3 minutes, tell us your name and address, and tell us what's on your mind. But before we jump into public comment on those items that are not on our agenda, things that are on our agenda, you'll have an opportunity after or in the middle of each item. So wait if you came to comment on something that is on our agenda until later. But before we get into public comment on things not on our agenda, Chris, do you have anything in the way of preliminaries?
I don't. We have our speakers are all here, so as soon as we get through public comment, Dan Clark will be ready to kick us off with that discussion, and we'll move through it. I anticipate, depending upon how much that dialogue takes place, maybe hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes on item 1. I think the second item should be a little shorter than that, and the third item is an update for you. It's not meant to indicate we've satisfied that initiative. I just want to give you an update on where we are there. So I think that's probably 20 minutes plus or minus. So just a little bit of a time schedule as we work forward.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. So the goal would be to get to our break, either finish our meeting without a break tonight, or after, we want to get at least through the first and the second items before we take a break, if we can do that. So, okay, well, then let's get started. First item up then will be public comment on items not on our agenda. So if you came to give public comment, now's your time. Please come forward and take 3 minutes, tell us your name and address, and it's all yours. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, sir. My name is Clark Johnson. My wife's name is Young Johnson. She's here with a neighbor of ours. I live at 6180 Masters Boulevard, Billings, 59106, in the Augusta Ranch subdivision. So I would like to request that an official sanctioned Montana Department of Transportation speed study be conducted for the 4+ mile highway stretch that runs from Shallow Road till past Ironwood. This whole stretch goes west. The initial part of this road is 45 miles per hour, but changes to 55 miles per hour just past Yellowstone Country Club. This road is called many things: Rimrock Road, Highway 302, 62nd Street West, and Moat Road at various points on it. The Montana Department of Transportation has a procedure that investigates speed and possibly recommends a speed change. And I would like the City Council to approve that. What the Montana Department of Transportation's website says, all speed limit investigations are conducted in cooperation with local officials. The initial request for a speed study may come from a concerned citizen. However, Montana Department of Transportation requires individuals to work with the local government to demonstrate the city or council in question supports that speed study. And that's what I'm asking tonight. It will take 9 to 12 months to complete, approximately. My wife, Young, and I have lived in our home 200 feet from the intersection of 62nd Street West and Masters Boulevard for over 5 years. We have seen major changes in highway traffic volume, much of that at what I believe to be high speeds, even higher than the 55 mile per limit at our neighborhood. We have also experienced significantly higher traffic noise. Some of that increased traffic noise comes from 18-wheeler diesel engine trucks, which are often construction trucks, and rock quarry trucks. They're very loud as they engine brake or accelerate. Diesel trucks are often very loud with limited mufflers, but it's the safety problem that concerns us most. The speed limit is 55 miles per hour past our neighborhood, but the vehicles are often much faster. Our neighbors often say that they feel that they're about to be run over from behind as they slow down to enter our neighborhood. The same thing occurs as they leave the neighborhood with a car that appeared to be distant, now directly on their bumpers. That car is going fast. The drivers are going very fast and they don't wish to slow down. The road seems to be a favorite also with bicycle riders out for a long country ride, maybe all the way to Molt. They obviously have a right to be there, but they also add to the narrowness and busy traffic on the road. On July 19th, a motorcyclist was killed at that intersection 200 feet away from me. Was that my time?
Yeah, it was your time, but go ahead and wrap up.
Okay. I was there. The motorcyclist was mostly dead when I got there. That's a sorrowful thing, okay? But it made me compelled to do this campaign. And I've gone through, put up a change.org petition. 150 people have signed it from all walks of life, not just my neighborhood. I'm here to ask you to initiate this safety, the speed study for the section of road that I talked about, from all the way from Shiloh to past Iron West subdivision.
Thank you very much. And just for anybody who hasn't had a chance to see it, Mr. Johnson sent us all an email mid-afternoon going through a lot of that with detail, and then that was forwarded to Debbie and Mac, our Public Works Director and City Engineer, and also Rod Nelson, head of MDOT, was copied on that. So at some point, Chris, I'd hope maybe we could get some sort of further comment from staff on those issues. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Council.
Next.
Wesley Dunn, Dorothy Lane. Council, hello, Mayor, Chris, how you doing? So I gave y'all 3 topics last week. I'm gonna hit on one today. Mayor, how do I do this? This is just a Google map that I wanted to share with the council.
I bet you Chris can distribute that. Thank you.
I don't have everybody's. But what I would like to do, for some reason, from Bench to Megan, there's no sidewalk. All the way down Dorothy, all the way to Kenneth, there's a sidewalk for pedestrians, children to walk on, ride on, whatever they want to do. So with that, you see on there, the line in yellow is what I'd like to propose. Us getting a sidewalk in there. I mean, I don't know what we have to do to get there, and I know it might take some time, but I do feel like this is something we need. And that's all I have. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do need my stuff.
You're okay. Amber Dunn, Dorothy Lane. I'd like to first start by saying if you Google, is Billings, Montana safe? You come up with article after article after article of how not safe it is and the reasons that it's not. And I'd just like to read to you guys a little bit of an article that I found that was published on April 25th of this year. And it says, recently we've seen a mass increase in violent crimes across the city. Shootings and stabbings are very common these days, despite our constant desire to have those things, to not have those things in our neighborhood. In fact, MTN News reported that 10 people died across 7 different shootings across Montana in the month of January. That's nearly 2 dead from every shooting. That's too much. Billings particular is second only to Great Falls in violent crime. Billings 2020, we had approximately 126 crimes for every 1,000 residents. I hate to say it, but Billings isn't a safe place to live. Billings Mayor Bill Cole was featured in a Times article of 2021 in August. Cole highlighted on the influx of the population in Billings during the pandemic and said that it was because of our political affiliation or because of the sense of community Montana and Billings brings to people. The safety of Billings was also brought up in the mayor's interview, to which he cited meth as the main cause of this crime. So despite violent crime, it seems that people are still deciding to move here for one reason or another. I only say that because meth has impacted my entire family. So we knew then we had a problem, and my husband gave you guys a name last week. We knew 5 years ago we had a meth problem when that name was a problem. So my feelings on this are the police are not allowed to police, and certain people in the police refuse to do their job. I've seen it happen with my own eyes where I've called, no one's done anything. They walk away after they speak to 2 different people and leave the scene. That's not how keeping our community safe, I believe, is going to happen when police don't police or are unable to police. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jacqueline Garcia, Dorothy Lane. As many of you know, there is an ongoing problem in my neighborhood and much of Billings. There has to be something we can do as a community. We have been calling many people to get help, but everyone seems to continue to pass the problem off to somebody else. I often get the same common questions over and over again. Have you talked to the police? Have you talked to animal control? On animal control, I called animal control. They came out. 20 minutes later, the dog's running the street again. This is a vicious dog. And we're sending videos to animal control to show the dog's not taken care of. Have you tried calling the school? Yes, we have. Have you tried talking to transportation for the school district? Yes, we have. Have you talked to city council? Obviously, we have. Our children and the children in our neighborhood safety is at risk. With so many codes and ordinances being broken, there has to be something someone can do. I can beat a dead horse by bringing up the problems over and over again, but what is it going to get? What is it going to do? Nothing. I feel as if my concerns are falling on deaf ears. We need to not just say enough is enough. We need to make the changes. Actions speak louder than words. Let's come together as a community and clean up our town. It's time that we show pride in all of Billings, not just some of Billings. Not just say, hey, welcome to our town. Look at these wonderful places. But we're going to ignore all the graffiti, the weeds growing everywhere. We're going to ignore all of that, but I'm going to show you the wonderful parts. That's not what Billings is about. It's about a whole town, not just bits and pieces. So we know that we have a meth problem here, obviously. Crime above national average, 139.45%. According to the most recent data from the FBI, I think they're pretty resourceful, and I think you could believe them. The total crime rate in Billings is 139.5% higher than the national rate. That's the nationwide. I'm a transplant. I was proud to move to Billings, and I still am. But it's time that we take pride in our town, all of us. Why is the crime so bad? Because the meth addictions are so bad. Why aren't we enforcing the codes? Why aren't we enforcing the bills that are passed by our legislature? Someone has to start enforcing something, because when you piss the chief of police off, guess what happens? Nothing. Nothing gets done. And I have personally seen it. I know I have been a thorn in his side. And guess what? We're not getting stuff done because of that. It's time for us to make a change. Enough is enough. Let's do it. Let's not sit in our fancy homes, in our gated communities, by the golf course, and pretend like the rest of Billings doesn't matter. Because it does. The transportation department for the Billings School District, the guy, Keith Adams, moved to the Heights so his children would be safe. They're not safe.
Jack, I'm just reminded your time's up, so if you can just wrap up.
I will wrap up. But he moved to the Heights so his children will be safe. And there's nothing he can do to help other children be safe. So who can?
Thank you.
Hello, Sean, Dorothy Lane. I have several things I want to touch on that 3 minutes and even going over will just not allow. I'm a husband, a father, work my 9 to 5. I don't have time to go on vacation. I don't have time to do stuff like that. All my time is now being dedicated to this problem. This problem is now problem for me because it's the neighbors, it's the people around, children, women, safeness, all that good stuff, right? But this is a problem that I'm reading all these articles, and just like other people have touched on today, Billings sucks when you Google it. Billings is a violent, horrible place when you Google it. FBI statistics, almost twice the amount of the nation. It's very crazy. And for someone like me to come in here that doesn't know anything about your House bills, that doesn't know anything, I'm trying to teach myself and learn in hopes that I can educate you guys, or the ones that don't know what's going on in their neighborhoods, maybe you should really reach out and see. But I've noticed a couple things, especially the House Bill 116 that was just passed in 2021. It states in there, houses known for meth labs. The police must report that to the DEQ and to the health department. They're supposed to come out, run their testings, and do stuff. Well, when 116 passed, that also brought it to the use of meth and smoking meth in the home. Smoking meth in the home contaminates homes far more than the labs do. There are so many health and safety violations, especially those of renters. How many homes, when you look on that page, are 2001, 2003, barely updated? I can almost guarantee none of those cops are showing their findings and reporting this to the people, the appropriate agencies that need to be reported. They should have their contaminated homes cleaned in a way that is shut down for a long time. If you don't know anything about meth, I got some paper and some statistics that you guys can have. I'll email it to you guys later on, whatever it is. But as well as that, Chief St. John wants to get a little butthurt and not do his job. That's perfectly fine. He wants to do his job in other categories, be a face, be a spokesman. That's fine. You're a cop, enforce the laws, do your job, clean this town, protect and serve. There are also so many different codes, and I talked to code enforcement, especially Marshall, and he can't get together with any meetings now because of that last meeting that we had, unless he is given authorization and told to. But if you look up 45-8-111, so many different things inside there that these criminals can be cited. 45-8-112. You got the ordinance number 04-5280. You got sections 18-301, 18-18302, 303. I think a lot of these things need to be looked at because I might have just solved your guys' puzzle. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name's Kathy Johnson. I live at 6190 AVR Boulevard in Augusta Ranch, and I also am requesting for a speed study to be done. I'm on the corner of Molt and AVR, and so I have a front row seat to witnessing so many close calls. We have a lot of bicyclists that ride down the fog line and a lot of joggers, and it scares me to death because I see like a dad pulling riding a bicycle with a little trailer behind him with 2 little babies in it, and then like a little 5-year-old on a Spider-Man bike or something going behind him, and then his wife behind them watching. And I'm like, a whole family is just gonna get taken out all at once because that speed 55 and right outside, like I said, I'm on the corner right outside my intersection heading toward Ironwood. There's a sign, share the road. and it's impossible it can't be done because there is no shoulder. You literally will run families off into the high grass and gravel and down a hill if a car is coming in the other way, also at 55 miles an hour. And you can't get over for the bicyclist because you'll have a head-on collision, both of you going 55. And so your only choice is to beep, and you feel bad running families off the road with little children and their bikes, but it's either hit them or hit the car head on. And I hear, on a daily basis, I hear skidding, I hear beeping, and I'm almost afraid to look out the window and see what I might see. There's the school bus turns the corner and drops the kids off right at my house. Same thing, they beep at the school bus because he has to slow down to turn because you can't make a turn going 55 miles an hour. And same with me. I've gotten things, people have beeped at me, flipped me off. I put my blinker on well in advance because I'm the second entrance coming into the neighborhood, and so there is no turn lane. So I have to just stay in the road until I make my turn, and they get right on my tail. They beep. They have thrown things at me. Our house even got paintballed, which I kind of wondered, was it just a random attack or was it somebody was angry because I slowed down, put my blinker on and slowed down to make the turn, because whether I have my little grandson in the back seat or groceries, or if the roads are icy, you just don't want, it's dangerous to take that turn. You can't take a turn going 55 miles an hour. So we have to slow down. And because the speed is, and I'm like, I don't know what people are in such a hurry for, because I don't know, I'm like, where are they going? It's only Ironwood out there. After that, I don't even know what's out there. But if we could just get it to slow down until we get past the Falcon Ridge subdivision, the Augusta Ranch, and then Ironwood, and then maybe pick it up after all the neighborhoods end, because we do. Like I said, we have a lot of joggers, a lot of bicyclists, and yeah, and deer. I've been doing dishes, looking out the window, and bam, and I hear it, and the deer in the middle of the road, and that, you can't help that, but it would greatly help safety in the area if we could just drop that speed down. I've lived there 12 years, and I was telling Clark, thank you for finally doing something about it, because every year I'm like, I really should say something before somebody gets killed, and then every once in a while there's like a pullout, like a gravel pullout across the road from me, and there'll be a police officer there with radar, and I'm like, finally, maybe that they're looking into dropping the speed. But so hopefully if we could just lower the speed, that could be the lesser cause or least cost for the city, because if you either that or widen the road to give us a turn lane, the way the first entrance has, to be able to get out of everybody's way to take the turn. But even then, that's not going to do anything for the people that are jogging and riding their bikes out there. So.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Just real quick before they have to leave.
Sure.
Some of I would assume some of what you quoted were state statutes, some were city codes and whatever, and I couldn't write fast enough. If there's a way that you could email those to council so that we can see what you're referring to, that would, I think, help us. And our emails are on the city website if you need to get those. Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll continue public comment. Oksana.
Good evening, Mayor Cole and City Council members. My name is Oksana Zakhachenko. I'm at 2902 Minnesota Avenue. I'm the program director for Montana Rescue Mission. I've been with the Rescue Mission for 4 years now, working directly with our homeless folks. First, I want to thank Mayor Cole and City Council members who were able to make it to our groundbreaking for our unified campus. It's very exciting, and we appreciate all of the support. I have spent the last few years not just working with Matt on Unified Campus Project, but also on revamping our entire programming and expanding our services, focusing more on mental health, substance abuse, and workforce development for those who can work, of course. We believe that warehousing people who are homeless is not a solution. We want to see people get well and housed. We now have 5 major programs so far: emergency shelter or low barrier shelter with pretty limited hours, as you know. Short-term program for those who need minimal help, long-term program for those who need extra help and have a lot of barriers to work through it. That's about 12 months. Phoenix program for those who are in recovery and may have relapsed and need to get back on the right track. Transitional program for those who need extra time after meeting their initial goals. Each program is flexible and it can lead into another program. We have therapists, peer support, case managers, coaches who work with our shelter guests. We have a facility and a sustainability plan that makes sense. In July, we served 299 people. That includes people with disability, probably a dozen people with walkers, 3 people in wheelchairs, which is extremely difficult within our current facility. A few people on oxygen tanks, couple of transgender folks. If you also reviewed our proposal to the city, I'm sure you noticed how many of our people struggle with mental health and substance abuse. Now, as for our successes in the last quarter, we served 534 people. 282 of those people came through a low barrier shelter. Majority transitioned into our long-term program. 426 people we served in the long-term program, and 295 of those people were housed. For comparison purposes, in June, I believe COC housed 11 people out of 500 on their list. Most of the people who were not housed and remained, they just simply remained in our program. This is just what we can do with our old facility. Instead of waiting on our facility to be completed, we decided to move forward with some of our programming pieces that are so necessary in our community. Effective September 1st, we will temporarily extend in our hours for our emergency shelter. We just can no longer wait or rely on somebody else to do something. We can't, along with that, we are rolling out a recovery program to help those who are struggling with addiction to more effectively rehabilitate our guests and help those in need. We just can't watch people sleep on sidewalks of Billings anymore. It's inhumane, it's unacceptable. My team is a group of very experienced professionals in working with homeless, case management, mental health, project management, and education. We are now in need of city's help so that we can provide those extended hours, expand our services to a greater extent so that we can meet the increased need, so we can add qualified security to keep not just our homeless shelter guests safe, but also to keep our staff safe. And so that we can ensure adequate staffing levels are achieved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for your services, your efforts, and your staffs and donors and everybody at the rescue mission. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, is there any other public comment? Go ahead. If so, please come forward at this time. Any other public comment on items not on our agenda this evening? Again, you'll have an opportunity to comment on anything that's on our agenda when we get to that item. Okay, thank you very much. We'll close the public comment period on non-agenda items. Move then to our first item on our regular agenda, which is our charter update, our charter review. Chris, would you like to introduce this and also introduce our speaker?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So you may recall that late in 2021, the Council passed an initiative. This particular initiative was asked myself to bring a resolution back in front of the Council establishing a city charter review committee. And I think as I work towards doing that for you, I think it would be helpful to continue just kind of educating ourselves on charter, the state constitution relative to review of local government. So I've asked Dan Clark from the Local Government Center. You guys know Dan, he helped us with orientation. We work with Dan through the Montana League of Cities and Towns and many other respects. So I've asked Dan to come tonight to continue to provide us with kind of base information so that as we work towards ultimately a decision of whether we're going to have a charter review committee established or not. So that really is the purpose. I'm going to turn it over to Dan to kind of kick things off. And you had some information in your packet, and I apologize for the late this afternoon. We emailed out, and then I've got, I think, copies in front of you to share, hard copies of the information that came late this morning or early this afternoon. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan. And the idea, obviously, we're in a work session. We've been having a number of these lately where we get to have a exchange of ideas and more of a conversation and a dialogue rather than, a formal council meeting. So that's the intent. So thank you, Dan, for coming over tonight and agreeing to spend some time with us this evening.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mayor, for the invitation. I love informal. So, if you've got questions as I go through my conversation with you, as I highlight certain things, please feel free to ask.
Would it be helpful, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
As we kind of work here, you walked in just as we were starting. Would it be helpful if we put up on the screen the information that you sent
Sure.
this afternoon or anything in the packet material? We had the highlighted charter that you talked about last week. We've got our clean charter. I just frankly didn't want the council, sorry.
Right, yeah.
Sorry, I need to use the mic. Thanks, Councilmember Neese. So in the packet material was the charter. Dan had marked up an older version of the charter. There really is no difference for the purposes of this evening, but both those were in the packet, as well as the initiative. The materials you gave us this afternoon, would it be helpful if we put any of that on the screen, or where do you want to start kind of in the conversation?
So we could start, if you could pull it up. I'm interested in the top of the handout that has the constitutional references there.
Okay, we will we'll pull up that email, get it going on the screen as you get things kicked off.
Okay. So some of you've heard me talk about this before, so I think we'll just review again the differences between general governing powers, self-governing powers. So you can start out with recognizing the governing structure that Billings operates under and what some of the alternatives are. And then we'll kind of peel off the layers as we go through that process. So 1972, when we adopted our Constitution, one of the compelling reasons that pushed us towards a constitutional convention, one of the many, was this issue of self-governance. That we did not have that ability within the state of Montana. The legislature did not grant the ability for local governments to operate with self-governing powers. And so that was one of the motivators. They had several bills that failed in the 60s. And I think communities like Billings and Great Falls and Missoula were behind, and Helena pushing for that. Anyway, it didn't pass, and that was one of the reasons why we went into one of the reasons why we went to a constitutional convention to rewrite our previous constitution. So that was one of the key things I think that was relevant to local governments, was this adoption of self-government powers and the charter form of government. So that's a unique, well, it's new to, it was new to us in the 70s in Montana. So as you look at, and I don't know which one, if you have the handout that looks like this, I love the highlight stuff, and after a while it just looks like, anyway, so it's a disease I have. I right click.
On the screen for you, but it should be
Yeah.
a copy to share between everybody.
And this one says at the top, nature of self-government in Montana, Constitution of Montana, Article 11. And this Article 11 is really the key for local governments in Montana. It talks about local government in Article 11 of our Constitution. And this is where they have the self-governing charters and the self-governing powers. So those municipalities and counties that operate with self-governing powers, what that means is that you can exercise any power that's not prohibited by the law or the Constitution. So it gives you a lot of flexibility for you to be somewhat nimble and responsive to the needs and issues that are in your community. And that you're not dependent upon the legislature to contemplate and give you certain powers or authorities to deal with issues in your local community. And so they've allowed that to take place. General governing powers, which is a majority of the municipalities, almost all of the counties, 53 of the counties, operate with general governing powers, which means they can only exercise those powers granted to them by the legislature. Now the difference, you can exercise any power that's not prohibited, which is far more expansive than those that can only exercise the powers that are granted. So if it doesn't say it in the MCA, they can't do it. So for you, if it doesn't say I can't, the assumption is that I can. So that's I think for you in a municipality of this size and the issues that you face, it provides you a lot of flexibility. It allows you to be a little bit more nimble and responsive to your citizenry and to address the issues that you're facing. So that's what I wanted to share with you at the top of that page. The next one I want to bring up is this section that talks about the charter government, Part 7, Title 7, Part 7. So Title 7, Chapter 3, Part 7. And so this is, in this section of the code, in Chapter 3 of Title 7, it goes through the various forms of government that are available to Montana. So the legislature said, well, you can choose the form of government you want to operate under. And it's very scripted for those initial forms of government. So the commission executive, the commission form, the commission presiding officer, town meeting. And then there's this charter form. The charter form of government is really where your local community can create its own local constitution. This is how we want to operate within our community. It's only available to those communities that adopt self-governing powers. So, in 1974 and 76, with the first voter review process, the study commission in Billings had to place on the ballot 2 questions. One, do you want to stick with your existing form of government, which was general governing powers and a commission manager form of government? Or do you want to adopt a charter form of government and self-governing powers with the commission form of government? And they chose to adopt the charter form. And so you've been operating, you were one of the pioneers, you've been operating with that form of government that you have today since 1976, when it was adopted by the voters. And what I want to highlight in this section of Title 7, Chapter 3, Part 7, this is the framework. When you're creating a charter, that's the framework you need to follow. It's pretty expansive, but it basically says you need to adopt, where is it here, in 704, I want to say, 703, top of the second page. Charter form of government shall be established by a charter which is a written document defining the powers, structures, privileges, rights, and duties of the unit of local government. So that's what you need to contain within your charter, is what are the powers, duties, structures, how are you going to be organized? And so looking through your charter, looking through the law, you have met all the criteria. Some charters that we see at the center are somewhat general and expansive. They just provide a basic framework to operate in, allowing the local government over time to be able to pass ordinances and resolutions to define and operate within that large, broad framework. We see other charters that are very prescriptive. They have a lot of structure and a lot of expectations placed in there, which the charter is somewhat, I wouldn't say static, but it's more challenging for a municipality to change, because you have to go back to the voters to ask them to modify or change that. So, to be clear, there's no right or wrong, but you just got to decide as a community how tight or structured do we want to be, or do we want to be open and expansive? I think your charter is somewhere in the middle. There are some, as you're aware, some pretty specific constraints placed within your charter that have not been removed. But you have added to that over the years. I've just quickly noticed that so it was adopted in 74. You were back in making some modifications in 1980, 94, 96, 98, and 2004. That's what I could just come up with, and I don't know if there's other times where it's been tweaked or, where the voters have adopted some sort of a change to your existing charter. So there's an indication that there's a lot of things that are going on that the public is having to adopt and ratify changes to your charter as you try to address the evolving needs of your community. And that would be an outcome of a charter that's a little bit more structured and specific versus a more expansive one that allows over time the municipality to move around and operate in there with policies and ordinances. Making sense so far? Any questions about that process up to this point?
No, Dan, I'll just comment
Go ahead.
for kind of your background. Most of those changes are in the same section of the charter dealing with spending authority. So when we need money, we go to the voters. That's where most of those changes have been.
Yeah.
Including just last year.
Yes, and that's probably a new one that's, you probably haven't, probably operating off an older version, the one on our website, which is, probably needs to be updated. Yes, and so that spawns from, well, in 1974 and 76, there wasn't a requirement at that point for municipalities to ask the voters for an increase in mill levies. And so it wasn't until the I-105 in the late 80s where that came into, kind of that taxpayer revolt that we had in the state back in the late 80s with I-105 that came through. And so I haven't read up too much on it, but my suspicion is that it was a negotiated agreement between the citizens that if we're going to pass this thing, we want to make sure we're capping or having some control over the spending for the city of Billings. And that we're not going to give you a blank check, so we want to put a check there. Since that time, we now have a check that the state law that you can't override because that is one of those prohibited powers that you don't have the ability to make that change, is that you have to go to the voters. Every municipality and every county has to go to the voters if they're going to change their mill value, their number of mills, to add more mills, which is what you're doing now. But the question you're asking is, can we change the charter to do this new thing? Either way, yeah. So it's not a big burden because you'd have to do that anyway. You just add, I guess, the language, change the charter. Yes, Miracle, that's correct. Yes, sir.
So, Dan, do you want us to open us up for questions as you go, or do you want us to hold our questions till you get to the end?
I'm happy to go to answer and
Okay,
respond as you
it's
go.
open
That's all right.
season. Then Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Dan, again, self-governing powers, unless the statute says we can't do it, then we, as a self-governing organization, government, we can make up our own statutes. As I understand that correctly? Now, I guess I would like to know what you know of the intent of the legislation that may be in place that doesn't say we can't do it. It says this is how it should be done. But does that mean that as a self-governing power we can add to that as long as we do at least that? Because it's not saying we can't do it, and we would do that. But can we add to some of the legislation that where it doesn't prohibit us by saying we can't do that? We can't create new legislation within this category. If it doesn't say that, can we create new legislation, add to some of the statute?
I'm not certain specifics, but so in a general sense, yes. So here's a way to look at it. All the statutes you see in Title VII that gives a framework and structure and powers of local government, those still apply to you until either superseded or over. Yeah, so they would still apply. So if there's something there, they say, hey, we like this, but what we want to add to it, you could do that. If that makes sense. So all those general governing powers, authorities that you have, that comes with you, and then you can tweak, twist, change, and add to that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
So Dan, if we just clarify our discussion here, we're ready to answer or ask a lot of questions, probably specific questions about charter amendment procedure. But I think you were just talking about general stuff. So I'm wondering, are you done with your presentation? And if we've got any question, or do you want to finish with where you were going on charter amendment procedure?
I'm not certain I understood your question.
Yeah, okay. Are you done with your presentation?
No, I've got more to go.
So. Why don't you finish, and then we'll get our questions in, and that way we know what you've got. Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. So the handout that we had up earlier that had the Constitution at the top. So if you look at the section down below, this is Title VII, Chapter 1, Part 1. This is where it talks about the nature of self-government power. So this kind of gives you a little more clarity. So as you all know, we have the Constitution that gives us a very broad framework, and then the legislature meets and creates the Montana Code Annotated that provides a little more detail and substance to help us understand what the Constitution means. And so in my reference to your answer, Commissioner Neese, is that right? Did I say that right? I'm sorry, council member. 71105 at the bottom of page 1 is where it refers to the state laws applicable until superseded. And so that was where it statutorily talks about that. The powers denied. So if you turn the page on that section to page 2, 71111 is where it talks about powers that are denied. And the legislature here in the last 3 sessions has gotten pretty entrepreneurial about adding more to that powers denied. So again, limiting those opportunities for you as a local government by adding more to that list. So that can be a bit challenging for local governments as you try to be responsive to your needs and try to provide efficient, effective services to your constituents. I highlighted in the, I don't know if that's a blue, turquoise, whatever that color is, 20, 21 through 25, those are all added since 2017 to our, but in here again, it identifies the limitations to your powers. So those powers that are denied. And then if you turn the page to 71112, that's the powers requiring delegation. So for example, it talks about in 71112 sub 1, the power to authorize a tax on income or the sale of goods or services. So that's a power that's delegated. And so what the legislature has done now is they delegated that to certain communities that meet a certain criteria that they can then vote in a resort tax. And at this point, your community, because of your size, we'll just start there, your size does not qualify to be a resort tax community. So they've delegated that authority to have a sales tax to certain communities that meet certain criteria. So it's a power delegated, but not broadly, it's not denied and it's not broadly available to everyone. It's in certain circumstances. So that's just an example of how those powers denied statutes operate. So as you're contemplating, looking at your charter, which I don't think we need to review, you're probably fairly familiar with it. You have the charter in front of you. As you contemplate the upcoming voter review process, and I'll touch on that next, as you contemplate that, you're still about 18 months, give or take, out from initiating the voter review process. And so thinking about your current charter, is there things that we want to modify or change? Is there things that are challenging for your city right now as you're looking at the future, and do you have the sufficient powers, or are there certain constraints that you have based on your charter and you want to make some modifications? So you can so that's part of the discussion we can have today when I open it up for questions, is to think about the timing of where you are today and with the upcoming voter review process.
So Dan, as you get ready to continue move forward, Mayor, if I can jump in, I think, not to be overly presumptuous, but the initiative passed by the prior council, in essence, was a statement that said we don't want to wait until 2024. We would like to create a committee to start reviewing this charter before waiting for this process. But I asked Dan tonight to explain how the standard process works, as I think that's critical to understand whether we do anything or not. That's what happens across the state of Montana. But again, it was an initiative. It doesn't carry strength beyond that. The initiative was, Chris, you bring us back a resolution creating a charter review committee. And that's where I think we could ask 101 questions about our charter, the details of how to run the city, what we love, what we hate. That's not the conversation. The conversation is about what information do you need to better understand whether you want to initiate a process following through on that initiative to start this review sooner than waiting for the standard process to roll forward in 2024. So sorry for the interruption, but thanks, Dan.
Yeah, and so up on the screen and in your handouts, you have, this is the timeline, just a brief outline of the timeline that you'll need to to initiate. It's not discretionary on your part. This is a requirement. It's a constitutional requirement. You're going to need to take an affirmative action in placing the question on the ballot. Do you want to study your form of government? And so there you can see in February, about that time is when you're going to pass a resolution. That resolution is going to identify how many people you would like to propose to serve on your study commission and the number of dollars you would think it would take to adequately provide resources for a study commission to perform the study of your existing form of government alternatives and place something on the ballot. So those are the two things that you do have discretion about. How big is the commission, or the study commission going to be, and how much is it going to cost? You initiate that process. It's on the June primary. If they vote yes, then people can file to be study commissioners, and then they get elected in the November election. And then shortly thereafter, they're sworn in and they begin their task of studying. They can put something on the ballot at any election that happens during that time up until the November election, the general election of 2026. That's the last time that they can place something on the ballot. So a community your size and the complexity and the amount of engagement that this study commission would have to do, it may take all of that time in order to get the process going through, come up with some proposal, and present it to the public. There's another handout that has your history. The City of Billings Local Government Voter Review History, and you can see what has happened over your history. I have in half of one of the reports, one of your final reports from 2000, or what was the date on this? I think it's 96, from 96. And just to give you an idea of the amount of work that this study commission put in the 1994 to 96 voter review or local government review, this is the list of things that they did. Public input research, interview of current and past local government officials, interview of our city administration and all 12 city department heads, interview of government officials, persons working familiar with other forms of government, 4 public hearings, in-depth review of the charter, a telephone survey conducted for the study commission, formal meetings of the Yellowstone County and Laurel study commissions, and interviews with members of study commissions that wrote our charter so they went back to 20 years prior. So this is 20 years ahead of when it was adopted. That's just a list. Plus they met, apparently somewhere else it says in here, they met weekly for almost 2 years. So there's a lot of work that went into this effort, and you can see they were successful in their proposals were adopted in the 1996 voter review. So that's a little bit of your history. You can see the timeline for doing the voter review process. So the question that Chris was bringing up, and part of your initiative, is should we get something going now prior to the voter review process? And so hopefully I've provided enough framework for you to consider that. And I'm happy to respond to questions and share kind of my thoughts and experiences in doing this work for nearly 15 years or so. And we can work through your thought process of looking, should we start something now? Should we wait? And what would be the benefit if we started now? Could we dovetail them together? There's a lot of things that we can think about. So we've been brainstorming that around our office for a little bit of time, trying to think what would be some alternatives for you to consider as you move forward. So.
Okay, thank you very much. If that concludes, we'll put some questions. And Council, we've got another item after this. We want to make a break, so we'll try to be done half an hour or less. I'll recognize Councilman Purington. Before I do, I want to make one kind of introductory comment, or I hope clarification. Because Chris used the terminology in referring to the initiative as a voter review commission. I would take issue with that terminology. Instead, the initiative called for creation of a committee.
Correct.
And so in 73103 sets out 3 ways to amend your charter. And I don't think this is any of Dan's
It's
materials.
not in
but-
the handouts I
Yeah,
brought,
yeah, so, but I'll just read it
Yep,
to you.
go ahead.
So, an amendment to a self-government charter or an adopted alternative form of government may be proposed by, so what initiates it, ultimately it has to be voter approved, of course, but either petition, as provided in 7310125, so the voters or the citizens could just initiate the process through petition. B, local government by ordinance. Or C, a study commission recommendation pursuant to 73192. And that's this big process where people are elected. It's like a constitutional convention. It's a big deal. So there's that process. But what I guess I'm understanding is we're in the world of that second option, the local government by ordinance. And so we can put forth our proposals. They could be small tweaks, they could be major changes, but the question is whether we would want to engage some committee to guide us in creating that ordinance. But that's, again, is separate from this study commission, the whole kit and caboodle process, which is set out in my 5 or 6 pages of state in the MCAs of how that process works. So anyway, with that kind of introduction, Councilmember Purinton, Councilmember Ripsis.
Well, I guess that's part of my question, because I think that's what we were looking at, was that local government by ordinance, and for the committee to study. So that means we're not governed by the number that's on the committee and how much we're going to spend, because then it would go back to a budget amendment, or it'd have to be put into the budget. So I guess what my question would be, if we did it ourselves by ordinance, what sort of time frame are you looking at with that? Do we move as fast or as slow as we want?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just mention that recently, the city of Havre went through a similar process, and they put on the ballot by ordinance, placed on there to adopt self-governing powers, a charter, but they kept the same form of government. And so they went from general to self, and they put it on the ballot in 2019, I think just before the pandemic. Livingston placed it on the ballot in November of 20. It didn't pass for Livingston, making the same effort. And so, yeah, so this is not an uncommon practice for them. And so the amount of time it takes is up to you, and depending on the level of input from the public, or you can just make that decision. There's no criteria defining how what you need to do in order to do that, just that it has to be done that way. So you determine the process and the length of time to make that happen. Yeah.
Councilmember Ripsis, Councilmember Owen and Nice.
Thank you. Dan, I guess I have a pretty dumb basic question. The way you said it, the way you presented it, said in February 2024, we will do this. The way the mayor just presented it says maybe we will, maybe we won't, maybe we'll do this other thing. Which is it? If we do this council committee, do we then not do the February 2024 thing, or are we doing that no matter what?
You're doing that no matter what. It's a constitutional requirement. So now.
But clarify what that is.
Yeah.
That is putting something on a ballot, not necessarily going the rest of the way, correct, Dan?
So, yeah,
That is whether or not we want to, whether our citizens want to have a study commission to.
Yeah. So the Constitution requires that you need to ask the question every 10 years. And the voters then decide whether they want to initiate or to do a study review or not.
Mm-hmm.
So to be quite frank, you could torpedo that very easily. You could say it's going to cost $150,000, and they'll say no. So there's in some communities will do that. They'll just torpedo it off the bat. They put it on the ballot, but they'll make it so unenticing that the electorate will turn it down. Others will lowball it because they want it done. They want to encourage their voters to say yes, and they realize that we're going to underwrite. We're going to ask for $10,000, but we realize we're going to underwrite another $25,000 out of our general fund to backfill whatever they need to be successful. So there's a variety of ways that I'm probably saying things that, but that's the reality, right? I'm just being But yeah, it has to happen. So if you did something ahead of time, you could still get it approved, and this could go on as well. I've got a lot of different scenarios of how that all can seam together, but.
So essentially, we want to have something on the ballot and approved by voters. If we do this, our own committee, we want to have it out and passed before 2024, so that when we put something out in the 24, the voters are like, well, we just did this last year. Why are we messing with this again? This is stupid. Our government doesn't know what they're doing.
Yes, you could do that. If the timing doesn't work out, you could also be prepared and get everything ready. So if that does pass a study commission, then if you had a group of citizens working as as a committee, those committee members may be so steeped in this, they'd be the ones running for office, and they could just carry that work right straight through. That's one scenario. There's no guarantee, and this is the challenge. This is what I think Haver and Livingston were looking at, is there's no guarantee that the voters are going to vote yes. And then the people that may choose to run for office may be ones that have a different vision for Billings than what you may have. And so they just felt there's a lot of risks. So they wanted to be a little bit more in control of the narrative of what the local government might look like. End of the day, the voters are still going to approve it. But they would rather put something before the voters that they felt, that those commissions felt were appropriate, rather taking a greater risk for not knowing what would come out of that with elected commissioners.
Thank you, Councilmember Owen and Nice.
I have sort of a two-part question here. Thank you for answering that question, because that was on my mind as well. But when the resolution goes on the ballot, is there any ability on the part of council to sort of put questions in that scope, or say, you know, we want a study commission that will specifically look at X, Y, and Z in addition to anything else the commission wants? So for example, if council did some work now and we said, you know what, we really need them to further research these three things that we've looked into and think are important, can we scope that resolution, or is it only number and cost?
Yeah.
It's only number and cost. Okay.
That's what I would say, yeah. But I'm not an attorney. But I think there's some language in the statute, say, you know, that kind of helps guide you what that resolution looks like. And it's very, so what you're really, if I may, what you're asking the voters is you're asking the voters to tax themselves. That's really what the question is. You're saying, will you assess yourself an additional millage or X amount of dollars to perform a study commission? That's what the question is.
Not out of the general fund.
Right, so this is gonna be an additional tax, and you lay it down on them for 2 years, and then it's over. And whatever's left over goes back in your general fund, if there's anything left over.
Okay. And then I guess I'm wondering, I mean, I think ultimately having voters vote on things is the better way to go. But are there precedents or examples where there's been a study commission and they just bring their reports to council and council adopts by ordinance those recommendations? Or does it always go to a vote no matter what?
Yeah, so in Montana, and according to the Constitution, is that the people are in charge.
Yeah.
And so anytime you're changing the form, structure, or plan of government, the people need to approve that change or that proposal.
The only thing the city can do by ordinance is this commission that we're talking about tonight. Got it.
When it deals with your power, form, and plan of government, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Nice.
Thank you, Mayor. Some of my questions was answered with Tom's question, because I was a little confused as far as some of the process, but because I was there for the original motion, I went actually back and listened to it just to make sure. And I think, Mayor, you summed it up in the time as far as doing a 30,000-foot level at it, just to kind of get an indication of what we would have to do. But I was a little confused why you were saying we would do one thing versus another, but I think you explained it. Regardless, in 2024, we have to put the question out there, even if we've already done all the work and ready to go, the voters could just say, no, we want to do it through our through our own representatives on a commission versus the city council doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Councilmember Shaw, Councilmember Joy.
This is a really fast one. So kind of building off of Councilmember Owen's question, can we say the cost is zero for a study commission, that the city we decide the city's going to fund that as part of the budget? Is that allowed?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Wow, quick question, quick answer. I'm amazed. That was rare for me. I'm writing this down in my calendar.
Thank you,
Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I don't think mine will be quite that quick. I'm asking you a question of sort of an opinion question. So, if the council decided to put together this more informal committee type of structure, and they were tasked to examine certain things about our city charter that they may, we kind of feel is a direction that council should go, and they went out and had public meetings and solicited advice, would this be laying the groundwork for something that we would later want? I mean, if you're soliciting advice in public meetings, are you laying a groundwork for the bigger work that might have to go on? Thank you.
Yes, and so there's a variety of ways you can look at this, as do you want to start creating the framework, getting the conversation going in the community, leading up to the election. That could be one strategy, so that you've kind of framed it for the community, you're talking about where the friction points are, here's some opportunity, and get kind of a discussion in the community about it, because ultimately, the community members, the voters are gonna have to ratify whatever's put on the ballot for them. And so so there's a built-in incentive for you to get that level of buy-in and participation by the public. So there could be some of that work that you can do leading into. So if you did have a study commission, you can turn some of that work over to them and say, this is the work that we've done so far, for them to continue that work. Or if the voters turn down the opportunity, then you just continue on through, and then you can place something on the ballot by resolution, or by ordinance, place it on the ballot. The work that you have done. Is that answering your question?